It was late August, but the humidity of summer had decided to cling on through the rains of the oncoming autumn. Evenings were filled with gentle drizzle, the world quiet and still as the people of town watched for thunder from the shelter of their back doors. This quiet stillness bode well for the autumn to come, and the Halloween to come with it. Nights like these never failed to put me in that Halloween humour, and so I decided to explore town with my camera, capturing any scenes I could find of the eerie and uncanny while the town gently slept. I paused at a huge tree blowing in the gentle night breeze, the orange glow of a streetlight casting dappled shadows onto the grass. I set up my camera and began recording, hoping that no cars would pass by and ruin the audio of the rustling leaves. None did. I was alone in the silence, left to scan the shadows as the recording timer steadily grew to long minutes. As I finished up, I turned to see a silhouette standing nearby, its features unclear in the harsh streetlight.
That camera's fucking deadly, bud. I'd say you could get some class photos with that.
He was friendly, but I stayed on guard in case he fancied selling my camera for a song after a swift sucker punch. "Sure can," I replied. "It does video too. I'm getting some clips of the street for my channel while it's all quiet and spooky."
You're talking me language now, bud. If spooky's what you want,
He paused to wag his finger like he had just made a sale.
I've a few stories to tell.
He introduced himself, telling me he lived in an estate not far from where I used to live myself. He seemed a decent sort. "What brings you out and about on a night like this yourself?" I asked him.
The missus kicked me out. I was going to fly down to the 24-hour to grab a naggin if you fancied the walk.
I agreed, and he began to tell me his story along the way. He spoke of the nearby Lover's Lane, a small lane running down behind the petrol station we were making our way towards.
It's all built up now. New lights, new houses, the lot. But you wouldn't believe what happened down there back in the day, boy. Make your blood freeze so it would.
He was clearly enjoying drawing out the story for a better build-up. I got the sense he wasn't used to being listened to, so I indulged him. Besides, his enthusiasm for telling the tale was infectious. As it so happened, back in the day was the early 90s, the best time for urban myths to spread, by word of mouth and with little to no internet to ruin them.
The lane was just dirt, with that rusty little gate at the end.
He waved his hand in a broad stroke in front of him, an artist painting the scene onto his canvas of night air.
No tarmac or street light or nothing, just a dirt path. People used to sneak down there for a quick joint or a shift. Speaking of which,
He reached into his hoodie pocket and produced an immaculately rolled joint.
do you want half?
I politely declined. I made the right decision. He lit up as we strolled, and the second-hand smoke alone almost floored me. He continued his story after a deep drag of his joint, unperturbed by the Mary Jane miasma wafting from his mouth.
There was this girl. She was seeing a lad who lived around the corner from me. I won't say their names now, I'm superstitious about these things. So, she was doing the dirt on the lad round the corner from me. She was seen going down Lover's Lane, pretending she was going to the petrol station for some sweets.
He paused to dig me in the ribs with his elbow.
But she was getting some sugar alright.
He laughed as if he had spoken comedy gold. I couldn't help but laugh along with him. He took another drag. He nodded with urgency, eager to get the story moving. His expression darkened.
She was seen anyway, and someone ratted her out. Instead of saying it to her face, the boyfriend decided to wait until she was going on one of her little trips to the shop and follow her down. Sure enough, that's what happened. He followed her down, hoping to catch her in the act.
He paused to hold his hands out a forearms width apart.
And he took a knife this big with him.
We arrived at the petrol station, the fluorescent lights and shelter seeming like a cool oasis on such a humid night. Tiny droplets of drizzle were made a misty curtain over the harsh white of the station lights. After talking the attendant into selling him a naggin of vodka after alcohol sale hours had ended, we took shelter beside the public washing machines next to the station, out of sight so that he could take a drink.
So, in the dark, he walks right up to them while they're busy shifting, pulls a knife out on them and starts roaring his head off. The girlfriend's fella think he's about to get stabbed, so he grabs for the knife and things get messy. No lights at the time, remember, So the two were rolling around in the dirt and the dark, punching and stabbing in the heat of the moment. Then, silence. The body of the boyfriend is found the next day with the knife stuck straight into his heart.
He paused to take another mouthful of vodka.
The girlfriend and her fella must have fled town, 'cause no one ever saw him again. Good thing too after the rumours started spreading. Not just about them, but what was seen there in Lover's Lane after they left.
He shivered suddenly.
Fucking hell. Gives me shivers thinking about it,
he said, laughing at his own unease.
They say that the boyfriend's ghost haunts the lane, appearing on nights like this to anyone who's ever even thought about doing the dirt on their girlfriends or boyfriends. He appears beside you as suddenly as he appeared to his girlfriend and her fella, with that big knife wound still bleeding from his heart, all bloody and pale.
His eyes drifted to the lane just over the wall, lost in thought as he imagined the chilling sight only feet from where we stood. "Do you want to walk down it?" I suggested. He shot me an incredulous half-grin and sheepishly shook his head.
Nah, man. No way. Not now.
Go on, I encouraged him. I have my camera and all. Maybe we could capture the ghost on video and get famous. Think of the stories we could both tell then. He fidgeted for a moment, gears turning in his head. The chance of being able to tell the tale of the real thing had swayed him, it seemed. Without a word, he downed the entire remainder of his vodka and flicked his head towards the lane.
Alright, come on.
We rounded the corner and stood at the entrance to the lane. It seemed a mile long now, ending in darkness at the rusted gate that was all that remained of the old lane. I readied my camera, imagining a figure stepping forth from the shadows, knife blade glinting in the flickering streetlight.
Of course the fucking light is banjaxed,
he said with a nervous giggle, cursing himself for agreeing to walk down with me. I began recording, and we walked steadily down the lane. The temperature seemed to drop, and the lane was filled with the sound of the gentle rain and our echoing footsteps. Our unease mounted as we neared the dark part at the end. The gate was an old-style kissing gate, the kind that moved back and forth within a barrier so that only one person could go through at a time. My companion rushed through in his eagerness to leave the lane, which meant that if anything should appear behind me, my escape would be blocked in the long seconds it took him to walk through. I felt the hairs on my neck stand as I consciously chose not to look behind me. He pointed to a patch of broken tarmac behind me.
That's where it happened. That's where they found him. They said all the pain and anger in his heart came out in his blood, so nothing ever grew there again. Even when they tarmacked it, that spot never settled properly.
I made my own way through the gate. The man looked around him, clearly on edge, with the vodka doing little to steel his nerves. As we walked down the hill into a housing estate, we felt the unease leave us as we left the lane behind. I ceased recording and opted to take one last photo for the road. I lined up my camera and took a test photo to gauge the lighting. As I turned to thank the man for being my ghost hunting partner, I saw him standing agape, eyes wide with fear and stone cold sober. Without so much as a goodbye, he ran away in a dead sprint, leaving me alone in the silent estate. I forced myself to look back at Lover's Lane and saw only blackness and the light of the lane behind the gate. With the chills on my back never dying down, I walked home, checking over my shoulder the entire time. I looked the man up on social media the next day. To my amusement, he had been tagged in several incendiary posts from who I can only assume was his now ex-girlfriend. Abusive tirades of unpunctuated vitriol covered his timeline, making liberal use of the title two-timing scumbag and other colourful insults. I went over the footage and nothing really stood out. However, the photo I took revealed much more. It had only been a test photo, and so it was somewhat shaky and poorly exposed, all noise and shadows. But I could see well enough why my companion ran so suddenly, something my eyes hadn't seen, but his had. I did well to walk away when I did. This is what my camera had captured.